if he had botched it, if he had tried to evade the question, I think we would have lost everything. But he looked straight at me, and after a split second or 30 seconds, whatever that was, he was like, yes. And I said, fine, continue. Let's hear the rest of it. My name is Zorer. I am originally from Israel. We grew up in a pretty traditional family, not Orthodox, not overly observant, but traditional. We kept a kosher home. We observed most of the main holidays. We didn't eat bread on Passover, and we fasted in Yom Kippur. But we also didn't observe the Sabbath too much. So we were able to visit grandparents on the Saturday, and in the summer go to the beach. But definitely traditionally Jewish, with customs, not just the cultural customs, some of the religious customs. And God is always part of it. I think I grew up taking God for granted.
There was kind of a shift in how you saw God. Walk me through that process of what made you slowly...
Well, I think what happens is, as you grow, normally you start, learning more of history and learning more of the world and seeing what happens. And I think it happens to a lot of us. Sometimes we see religious people and we see how they behave. And you're like, well, that's not really how it's supposed to be, right? And then I was working in Jerusalem. I was a student after the army. I went to law school. And as a student, I worked in a health club in the center of the city, but I lived in the Mount Scopus, which is kind of in the north part. And I needed to drive on a Saturday. I had a shift, and I had to drive on a Saturday through the religious neighborhood. And, that's, of course, you're not supposed to drive on Shabbat and Sabbath. But, and I wasn't even driving. It was an Arab-Palestinian guy who was driving because we worked together and we lived near it. But they were just, all these religious people, Orthodox Jews, were outside cursing everyone because they were driving through their neighborhood on Shabbat. And I thought, well, how is that godly?
So when you first met these missionaries...
Yeah.
So how was that like? Like, what did they say, or why were you convinced to go to this once a week? And was this at your university?
Well, no, so I was at the university when they met me, and they had an office, a center, like an apartment in the center of town. And I think these are spiritual stuff. Like, so for example, I'm searching and I'm hungry for something because things don't look right. They don't feel right. I'm not super happy in law school. I don't think I want to be a lawyer. I don't know what I want to do. Something isn't right. So I'm searching. And so at the beginning, they just come with me with that survey. And I just fill the survey and give them my phone number. And then she calls me. And she kind of invites me to this evening. The first evening was that lecture about the 4 great realms of heart. And there was other people there. And I'm just one of them, and we have a conversation, and it's just a nice atmosphere. And so she called me again to continue. I just said yes, and I go once a week. And once a week, it's a very dangerous time. Everything can happen within a week. And later on, I did ask them, where's the others that were there in the first lecture? And how come you just inviting me? And they always told me that I appeared to them quite open-minded and open to hear. And so I think it's spiritual. I don't think there was a thoughtful reason. It was a nice atmosphere. I think I was drawn to that oasis feeling, like the kind of a place you can just think and talk about these idealistic ideas without feeling that it's ridiculous or impractical, kind of away from the regular craziness of life. Jerusalem, every time you get on the bus, you don't know if you're going to go off of the bus. It can explode. Or every time you go through there's just the tension, constant tension. So, having a place when this tension is different, and you talk about God and you talk about a hope that humanity will be better, I mean, I didn't buy it right away, but who can resist at least listen?
Yeah, which part of the divine principle do you think spoke out to you?
So the way I studied the exposition divine principle at that time in Israel, I basically went about once a week to that center where they were, and there was one Israeli guy who spoke Hebrew who taught me a lesson a week, and then we had dinner with all those nice Japanese ladies and continued to have discussion. And so it really became the one afternoon a week of a nicer conversation and stuff like that. So in the beginning, I mean, the divine principle, I mean, the principle of creation is something it's hard to deny. You know, it's kind of hard to say, oh, that's not true, that's not real. And then we heard about the fall. And I remember my you know, we taught it at that time as if this is the great revelation of like, it's not really a fruit. And I remember thinking, oh, I think my mother told me that. And then I remember when I told my sister the same thing about the fall, and she is like, oh, I think they told us in school. So of course, needless to say, it wasn't exactly like that. But I think as Jewish people, we have kind of innate knowledge of this earlier time. It's not explicit in the book, but none of us really, I mean, I can't say none of us, but I don't take it literally. At least the majority of the way we learned it in school, because we've learned the Bible since school. We've been learning about the Old Testament since second grade. And we don't learn it as scripture, as like, oh my God, it's the scriptures up. We learn it, it's part of our culture, it's part of who we are. And I think I've went through the book of Genesis once in elementary, once in middle school, and once in high school. And then we had a matriculation exam on the book of Genesis and other books. So it's a very close story to us. It's not just religion, it's who we are. So when I hear those stories in the divine principle, you know, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, these are familiar turf. Like, this is not, and I regard it as an interesting philosophy. It's an interesting take or interesting viewpoint on the stories that I've known all my life. And then we got to Jesus' course. And I don't know how much people know, or you know, but Jews really don't believe in Jesus. So some people, some Christians think, oh, the Jews think of him as like a prophet or something. No, maybe the Muslims think of Jesus as a prophet. The Jews don't think of Jesus as a prophet, and they don't accept Jesus, and they think Jesus is like the reason Christianity ended up persecuting us all this time. So there is this really strong rejection and a strong kind of apprehension about anything Christian and anything Jesus. So all this time, I'm learning the divine principle, basically, that, you know, creation, fall, and restoration, and it all makes perfect sense. It's not always exactly how it's written in the Bible, but it's fine, you know, like Moses' course, and it's interesting. It's always an interesting thing. And then that one week we get to Jesus' course, and, you know, Hod begins, and I said, wait, stop. Do you mean to tell me that Jesus is a true Messiah? And actually, I could see his, like, that direct question like that. He hesitated for a second. And yeah, every time I think of this moment, I think if he had botched it, if he had tried to evade the question, I think we would have lost everything. But he looked straight at me, and after a split second or 30 seconds, whatever that was, he was like, yes. And I said, fine, continue. Let's hear the rest of it. But then there's something that he says that stuck with me. It was a clock. And it's basically, it's kind of like you want to be with God, but you keep moving, and then before you know it, you're not. And so I think that was the moment when I'm a little bit of an all or nothing. And it was just kind of a aha moment. You're either with God or you're with Satan. If you're not with God, you're with the other side. And I said, fine, I choose God.
What made you go? I know I'm going off track, but yeah, what made you go full time? Was there like a specific?
Yeah, I mean, there was a specific moment, but it was kind of, you know, Mrs. Abba, Yoko-san, Hod, people were talking to me about becoming full-time. That's kind of the ideal. Like home members are fine, but it's, and at Israel, there was some Israeli members before. There was Hod, of course, stayed in Israel, and then there were some Israeli sisters, and they got married in the 82 blessings and spread out, and there was just me and him and a few Japanese and some peace ambassadors, like connections. So I think it was needed. Like God needed someone who'd be able to just do what needs to be done, let it all go, just offer it all up. It's not about you, it's about God, it's about what Providence needs. And the actually, and I kept hearing it, but I was like, what am I going to say to the judge? What am I going to say? What would people say? What my family, what would my parents do? I mean, that was a big deal, actually. And yeah, the way it played out, my parents did the 40 days and they needed to do the 3 days. And God told me, this is a big deal. You have to give up everything. And I did. But actually, when they did find out that I left my internship in the middle and then I'm not gonna, I finished the degree, but that was a big breakage to them because it's a long road, and it's a small country. Everybody, oh yeah, you're gonna be a lawyer, but no, you're not. So it's a big deal.